We are going to move to the next part of our program now, and I want to introduce, I really don't have to introduce, I just have to say here's Clara. I want to introduce to you Clara Keith, who's the Associate Superintendent for Race to the Top. She's going to talk to you about preparing your budgets, about the no-cost extension, and about merit pay. So we appreciate your attentiveness to her, and if you have any questions about these things, now is the time to ask these.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm assuming that these people are not leaving because it's me standing up here. But you better check those name badges because, boy, your budget is looking less and less. I'm just teasing. So give me a moment to get all of my paper here and make sure that I have my presentation here. For a moment there, I thought the governor was doing my presentation when he started talking about the money and the no-cost extension, and I was like, well, then I don't need to be up here. Again, thank you so very much for attending this summit. How many of you were here for Gale as well? Yes, that was incredible to see all of the districts who actually were RT3 districts bringing teams of folks here to participate in Gale. And I want to express my sincere appreciation to Deborah. I know she walked out for helping us to make this summit a part of Gale. It was very important to us that we not keep pulling you away from your districts. We know that this is a long time. I'm actually paying rent now. I'm writing my rent check. I've been here since Sunday. But we thought that if we already had you here, that it made sense for us to piggyback on what was already happening because this is about leadership. And so we really do appreciate your willingness to stay and work through the RT3 Summit as a part of Gale as well. So we have a lot to cover in this session. I am certain that I'm going to cover something that you may have questions about. I think it might be helpful, though, if you let me get through the presentation, write down your questions as you think of them, and then we have time left at the end of this presentation to allow you to ask your questions. And we also have the 4:30 session that we are calling Technical Assistance. If you have any questions that you really want to dive into, you really want us to make sure that we hear you completely, then we can have conversations with you at that particular time. So here, the next slide, please. So if you look at the topics here, I'm going to actually cover the steps in submitting your preliminary FY14 budget. And I'm going to go through this part quickly because we already had a seminar or a webinar in June, but I want to refresh your memory. And for those of you who were not able to participate, sometimes actually hearing a person talk through it will help clarify some questions that you may have had. I'm also going to walk you through the guidelines for implementing merit bonuses. I know you're all interested in that, and we will then look at the draft guidelines. I was really interested when the governor talked about having an extra time to make this happen. We're calling it draft because I'm one of those people, and Wendy will appreciate this. I trust, but I verify. So I trust that we're going to get a no-cost extension, particularly since the governor is mentioning it, but I want the letter that says we have it. So we don't have that yet, but we'll talk through that. And then I hope that we will have some time to talk about some considerations for sustaining the work. I want to walk you through some processes on supplanting and some things that you can think about there, and then some dates for upcoming webinars. I cannot hardly believe that we're in the fourth year, and I will say fourth and final. The reason I'm saying fourth and final is because we need to pretend or act as if this is the last year, because we really do not have the official notification that we have an extension. And until that happens, we want to make sure that you are prepared as if this is the last year. So what you will do with your budget is to develop a preliminary budget. The preliminary budget means quite a bit. It means that it is not your real budget, but it's going to be as close as possible. There are two things that you need to know. If it's your preliminary budget, we know that you may not necessarily have completed your completion report, so you may not know right to the penny how much money you have remaining in FY13 that you were not able to expend. And also, you may need to make a few changes, but we need to get your budget or your allocation to the State Board of Education and have the State Board to approve your allocation before you can actually begin spending money. So we really need that preliminary budget, and we need you to put it together and put it together as accurately as you possibly can inside of the consolidated application. Now, the thing that is going to be so hard for you to not do is press submit. You may not be the person who actually inputs the information into the consolidated application, but please help those folks to understand, since this is a preliminary budget, you do not press submit. What you actually do is get that person to send an email to your fiscal analyst, and that would be Theon Washington or Roderick Ford. And they will go through the budget to make sure that all of your requests for purchases are actually in line with the use of funds. I put this here anytime I'm talking about budgets because you need to know what the budget codes are for Race to the Top. Now, why is this important? This is important because anytime you receive federal dollars, you have to track those dollars separately. You have to be able to make sure that all of the costs that you're spending with RT3 are actually accounted for in your accounting records. Now, your financial people understand this clearly. I am just sharing it with you because you should be in the loop in terms of actually spending the money, and you will want to make sure that you see codes that are not only these codes, and these are important because these are the codes that you will see or your financial person will see when we actually draw the money down from GAORs, but you may also have local codes as well, which is fine, but you need to be in that loop for a number of reasons. One is I actually am holding you accountable for the dollars. Secondly, you want to make sure that whenever you are audited, you can account for every penny. And if you are a part of that process and you understand that there is a way that you have to account for the funds and you have to account for them separately, then knowledge to me is power. So this is really critical information. The grant period is October 1, 2013 through September 23rd, 2014. Now let me explain to you why there's an odd date here. The September 23rd, 2014, typically the federal fiscal year is October 1 through September 30. For whatever reason, the Georgia Department of Education received its grant award notice, and the end date was September 23rd. Now, I know we're being recorded, but I'm going to say this anyway. These are new people at the U.S. Department of Ed, and they just didn't know it should be September 30th. So we have to adhere to September 23rd. And we're going to talk later about the no-cost extension, but I do want to say now we need to act as if the end of the grant period is September 23rd. This is really important because all of your expenses must be between October 1 and September 23rd. And I know you are saying, but Clara, the fiscal year started July 1. That was the state fiscal year. So any expenses that you have, salaries, travel from July, August, and September of 2013 must come from your FY13 budget. You cannot start spending your FY14 money until October 1 and state board approval and DOE approval of your budget. I wanted to make that very clear because we had some issues last fiscal year with people not having enough money to pay salaries during July, August, and September. Don't panic if you have any questions about that, or if you think you don't have enough money. What you really need to do is email me if you think you may be running short, and just like last year we were able to solve your problems, I am here to solve your problems again if you have any. But hopefully you will know that. The most important thing on this slide, though, is that your expenses cannot incur anywhere between July and September. You need to look for October 1 to start paying your bills or even incurring bills. Okay? So all of your bills, now with the grant period is October 1, 2013 through September 23rd, 2014. So all of your bills must be paid then by December 23rd. And you're saying, but you said September 23rd. So you can make bills, you can create bills, you can spend money through September 23rd. But by December 23rd, 2014, every penny should be drawn from Gayors. Gayors is our electronic system. It's like our bank. It's the DOE bank. That's where we hold your money, and then you have your financial person, and they all know this. They go into the system and they draw money based on what your expenses are. After December, as great as I am, or I like to think that I am, I can't get your money for you because it goes back to the Treasury. That time period between September 23rd and December is called the liquidation period. That allows you a time to actually draw your money and get all of your bills paid. So this will be really very important, particularly if we don't get the extension. So please, plan for it, and we'll talk a little bit later about the extension. And again, all of the funds should be drawn from Gayors by December 23rd, 2014. Now, what is a budget? So a budget is really just your plan for spending money. And because it is a plan, we clearly do understand that sometimes unforeseen circumstances happen. Something didn't cost as much, something cost more. You thought there was a great idea, but the idea really wasn't a great idea. So you all know that we have a process called the budget amendment process. And we have been very flexible in year 1, year 2, and year 3. Unfortunately, we are going to have to tighten that up a little bit. And the reason we need to tighten it up is because if you're starting brand new activities after a certain period in FY14, you may not have enough time to liquidate. Now, you may have enough time to make expenses, but you may not have enough time to actually draw the money from Gayors. So we will still allow you opportunities to amend your budget. As a matter of fact, you will have to, because we are going to talk a little bit about merit pay. And of course, I just mentioned earlier that your completion report has not been done. So if your completion report hasn't been done, you don't know exactly the amount that is available. So you will have to make some tweaks. But what I'm saying now is this is not the year that you want to start brand new activities. Now, I know some of you are thinking, but what's a brand new activity? So let me give you an example of what is not a brand new activity. We really want you to spend the 4th year building capacity at the district and at the school level. What is not a brand new activity is you have recognized some needs in your schools for extra support for your teachers. Let's say it's a science class and you need to get extra help for that teacher. Now, you may not have extra help for that teacher or those teachers already written into your scope of work, but you do have a support plan in your scope of work because I have seen them all. And so you may want to add additional staff, a contractor or whatever, to help those teachers to make sure they are ready for Common Core GPS, for TEKS and LEAKS, for FIP, anything that's tied to the work that we are doing now. I would not consider that new. But let's say you wanted to hire 4 new math teachers, then I'm not saying you can't do it, but you know what you have to do. How are you going to sustain that? That would be the question that we would be looking for. How will you sustain it? And if you're going to hire 4 new math teachers and you can't spend this money until October 1, how long are they going to be working in the classrooms? So those are the kinds of things that you will need to think about. We still have the amendment process. Most important thing I want you to know is that any amendment will need a very strong rationale. Do we want to be flexible? Yes. Are we going to be flexible? Yes. But we want you to think very carefully through any amendments. So how do you start this process? You start with the scope of work. The scope of work is your best idea and commitment to what it's going to take to help us reach our goals in Race to the Top. And so in year 1, you have already achieved some activities. In year 2, you achieved activities. In year 3, you've done that as well. So year 4 should be what is left for us to do. But in order for us to provide a picture to anyone who would like to know what you have done throughout the grant period, we will need to know what you did in year 1, what did you accomplish, what funding sources did you use to make that happen. A major funding source will be Race to the Top. However, you have other funding sources. So listen to me carefully. Can you put this back on the slide? Yes. It's kind of hard to stand up here and look at yourself. It is. I would prefer to see the words. You all can see me, right? You don't need to see me on the screen, right? Yeah. Thank you. I'm just messing with you. Now I lost my train of thought. When you start getting old, you need to stay on point. Okay? You need to actually stay on point. So what I'm basically saying about the scope of work is we need to see the full picture of what you've done over 3 years, and then what you plan to do the 4th year. And you can imagine that your directions at the end of the grant period will be, now tell us what you accomplished at the end of the 4 years. And the reason for that is because we really do need to know what you have achieved. You have done some incredible work. Now, I don't know it by coming to visit your districts. I know it from looking at what you are putting on paper as achievements, what you're putting in your budget. I know it by looking at some of your assessment scores. That's how I know it. And so we will have to use that information to help other people to know what incredible work you actually did. So for year 1, year 2, and year 3, you will have to include that on your scope of work. That is different from what you did last year, some of you. Some of you last year actually, we allowed you to use a short form because we wanted to make sure that you had great flexibility and not have to go through all of the paperwork. However, for this time, we need all 4 years. Okay, so what I have here is an opportunity. Well, I won't share it now. So first thing you want to do is review your scope of work, and then you're going to determine what activities are completed, what activities you have not, what activities you want to complete in year 4. And then you're actually going to modify your scope of work. And then next slide, once you modify your scope of work, then you're going to actually put it all together, put your name, your district's name on it, and submit it through the Khan app. Now, the slide that you see now actually are the considerations that you really should think about when you're revising your scope of work. The first thing that you always want to think about is it in conflict with your memorandum of agreement? If it is, you know that our answer has to be no. And let me give you an example of a conflict. A conflict in your memorandum of agreement might be that you have decided that you're really not going to implement Common Core GPS. Or you're only going to implement it in 4 schools. or you're going to allow the principal to determine if they would like to implement the scope of work. And if they do, fine, and if not, fine. These are real examples. I'm not making it up. So in situations like that, of course, that is in conflict with your memorandum of agreement. So you want to always think about that. And then the second thing is, does it align with your strategic plan in your district? This is important because remember, this is to be a part of your core work. And if this is a part of your core work that you're doing, you don't want it to be something separate. So if it's not a part of your core work, then you may want to consider not adding it as a part of your scope of work. And the critical piece, will you be able to sustain it beyond Race to the Top? So when we look at your scope of work, these are the things that we are going to look at. The last bullet, did you include the line for merit pay? Will be one that we definitely will be looking at. We will look at all of these, but the merit pay one will be one that we will be looking at this year. Okay? So if you're wondering where do you get the idea from of where all of this money is coming from, or how do you know how much you have? We submitted in May, I believe, a forecast sheet for all of you. We gave you an allocation of your year 1, year 2, and year 3 amount during that time. And we gave you instructions to actually look at what your allocation was for FY13, look at what it was and how much you spent in 12 and 11, and you should have your total allocation for the entire 4 years, subtract everything that you've actually already spent and what you think that you're going to spend for FY13, because you haven't done your completion report yet.